Over the years, Disney has put out some of the biggest box office bombs of all time. From John Carter to The Lone Ranger, these were movies that were intended to be the next big thing, with tons of money being dumped into creating and promoting them. But they failed to click with audiences one way or another, and resulted in the loss of hundreds of millions of dollars. And possibly one of the most infamous duds is 2011's Mars Needs Moms. So join me today as we explore what exactly went wrong with this film, and how it became such a major disaster. 2011's Mars Needs Moms is actually based on a 2007 children's storybook by the same name, written by Berkeley Breathed. Soon after the book's release, the film rights were swooped up by Disney, with the studio intent on bringing the story to the big screen with CGI performance capture through Image Movers Digital. Image Movers Digital, also known as IMD, was a joint venture animation facility between Robert Zemeckis' movie studio, Image Movers, and the Walt Disney Company. It was first created back in 2007, but only lasted until 2011, which is something we will talk more about later. Up to this point, Image Movers Digital had only made one film, that being 2009's A Christmas Carol starring Jim Carrey. However, this wasn't the first time that this technology had been used by Image Movers, as before IMD was created, Robert Zemeckis made 2004's Polar Express, 2006's Monster House, and 2007's Beowulf. Each of these films had various degrees of financial and critical success, with Beowulf in particular being a huge box office bomb. Mars Needs Moms found a director and writer with Simon Wells, who was a longtime collaborator with Robert Zemeckis, having worked on films such as Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Back to the Future Part 2, and The Polar Express. But possibly his biggest director credit up to this point was the 1998 animated film The Prince of Egypt. So this man was no stranger to the medium. As for casting, we got Joan Cusack as the mom, Dan Fogler as Gribble, and Seth Green as our lead, Milo. Initially, Seth Green was set to do both the performance capture and the voice of Milo. However, once filmmakers went into post-production, they realized although Green was able to successfully mimic the physical movements of a kid, his voice wasn't quite working for the character. So IMD made the choice to replace all of Green's voiceover work with an actual 11-year-old kid by the name of Seth Dusky. They must have done this pretty late into the process, as in the very first trailer for this movie, you can still hear Green's voice.
Is that broccoli?
No, that's vomit, but I understand the confusion.
I told you to eat that!
You're not gonna make me eat it now, are you?
And I gotta say, I think they made the right decision here, because it does look a bit weird with the original voice. By the end of production, the budget was estimated to be a staggering $150 million. This was a huge gamble for both Disney and Image Movers, as their first movie together, A Christmas Carol, lost around $50 to $100 million just 2 years earlier. So this film would either become a smash hit and save the company, or it would bomb and seal IMD's fate. And I'm sure you know what happened next. Mars Needs Moms hit theaters on March 11th of 2011, not even cracking double digits with an opening weekend gross of $6.9 million. It debuted number 5 in the box office behind Battle Los Angeles, Rango, Red Riding Hood, and The Adjustment Bureau. In the US, it went on to make $21 million, and overseas it made $17 million, for a total worldwide gross of $39 million. This made the film a box office bomb. In fact, when adjusted for inflation, this is one of the biggest box office bombs of all time, with a total loss estimated at around $145 million. As you can imagine, this resulted in Image Movers Digital shutting down. But it seemed like they already knew this was going to happen, as they closed operations just 2 months before the film hit theaters. IMD officially shut its doors in January of 2011, laying off 450 employees and throwing several movies that were in development in the garbage. These movies included a remake of the 1968 Beatles film, Yellow Submarine, a sci-fi adventure film called Calling All Robots, a potential sequel to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and an adaptation of The Nutcracker. Although this would not mark the last partnership between Robert Zemeckis and Disney, as they would team up again in 2022 to bring us the abomination that is the live-action Pinocchio. So now that we know the history behind the film, let's explore a few reasons why it failed at the box office. First off, a big reason Mars Needs Moms failed is the motion capture animation. This style of animation is very costly, and historically, it hasn't yielded that great of a return at the box office. We already touched on A Christmas Carol, which lost around $50 to $100 million on a $175 million budget, but then there's also Beowulf, which cost $150 million and only made $195 million, with an estimated loss of around $50 million. Even the quote-unquote successes, like the Polar Express and Monster House, barely made any money back, with the Polar Express costing $170 million to make and raking in $318 million, and Monster House's $75 million budget grossing $141 million. Even in the same year as Mars Needs Moms, we had The Adventures of Tintin, which only made $374 million, despite being based on popular source material and having Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson's names attached. This film was the final nail in the coffin that these motion capture animated movies needed to die out in Hollywood, as we haven't seen one since, and honestly, it's probably for the best. Audiences simply did not like these motion captured animation movies, as they often bordered on the uncanny valley and looked kind of creepy. I mean, just look at the character designs in this movie. They look creepy as hell. And when you're an animated family film trying to bring kids to the theater, looking creepy is one of the worst things you can be. You want to entertain kids, not give them nightmares. For younger kids, the concept of your mom getting abducted by aliens is scary. And for older kids, a movie with the word mom in the title may seem childish. Coming from someone who used to be a kid, one thing I hated as a kid was to be seen as a kid. I was around 10 years old when this movie came out, and I remember Mars Needs Moms just wasn't cool. So I went and saw Gnomeo and Juliet, of course, because Shakespeare gnomes that sing Elton John were super cool. Speaking of which, there was also just a lot of competition in theaters for family films. Rango had just come out 1 week before, Gnomeo and Juliet was still doing good numbers, and Hop and Rio would come out the following month. Say what you will about these movies, but at least they were all better than Mars Needs Moms. Which brings me to my last point, the reviews. The film currently holds a 35% critic and 40% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, with the critic consensus saying this: the cast is solid and it's visually well crafted, but Mars Needs Moms suffers from a lack of imagination and heart. The movie also boasts a 5.4 out of 10 on IMDb, a 2.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and a 49% on Metacritic. It seems like for a majority of those who actually went and saw the movie, it didn't resonate with them. And I would like to take the time to share some of my personal thoughts and explain why I don't think this is a good movie. Alright, a quick recap of the plot for those of you who are fortunate enough not to have seen this movie. The film follows a kid named Milo, who ends up on Mars after aliens abducted his mom. They plan on using her memories to help raise their next generation of Martians, which in the process will kill her. So Milo teams up with a friendly Martian named Key and another Earthling by the name of Gribble to stop this from happening and save Milo's mom. The craziest part to me about Mars Needs Moms is how many people said yes at so many different points in production. You would think at some point someone would have said, "This animation looks like shit. Maybe we should rethink this approach." And maybe some people did. But obviously, their pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears as the public was subject to the torture that this film inflicts. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but this film is still pretty bad. When it comes to these family films with poor animation, usually I can overlook it if it has a good story or clever comedy. Case in point, Hoodwinked. Hoodwinked is a banger, and I will stand by that. The Adventures of Tintin is also one of my favorite movies of all time, and while I don't think it looks bad, I understand that a lot of people don't like the animation in Tintin. Listen, I'm even a big fan of the Polar Express, which has PlayStation 2 graphics. But what makes Mars Needs Moms different from all these other films is that Mars Needs Moms animation quality is equal to the story and humor quality. It's all just bad. To give credit where credit is due, this movie does have heart and its central message is very nice. The themes of family in the film are hitting stuff we've seen many times before, but it is still always relevant and mostly handled well. The backstory of Gribble and his mom was emotional and well done, but every time this movie starts to get onto something good, it's ruined since they can't focus up on the narrative without getting sidetracked by terrible jokes that kill the momentum of the story. I don't know if it's just me and I'm becoming more cynical as I get older, but I did not find anything in this movie funny. The character of Gribble was extremely annoying, and every time he tried to make a joke, it made me want to throw my TV out the window. I don't know why half the humor in this movie is just referencing stuff and slang from the 60s and 80s. It was such an odd route to take for a kids movie. And on top of all this, there's just some really weird things going on in the story. The romance plot between Gribble and the alien chick was a bad choice, and it made me uncomfortable. It was completely unnecessary, and it would have been so easy to just cut that out. Like, come on, we did not need to see that. It was more trouble than it was worth. I didn't find the world building all that interesting either. Usually with these terrible sci-fi movies, I can at least say the world building had potential. But I wasn't feeling it with this movie. I never felt attached to the Martians, and their society lacked a lot of flavor. It's the classic trope of the older generation who are in charge, suppressing creativity and forcing everyone to be uniform to maintain control. It's stuff you've seen in every other animated kids movie, except it was done 10 times worse, since we never get a chance to learn about our main villain or why they are doing all this. And it seems like everyone in this society already hates their leader, so it makes you wonder how they got into power in the first place, and why the status quo is the way that it is. The character designs on these Martians also just look unsettling. I'm all for making wacky and out there designs for aliens in animation films, but this just leans into the uncanny valley. Like, why did they have to make the aliens so thick? I'm sorry I had to say that out loud, but we were all thinking it. I don't know, guys. This is one of those movies that is just so bad, you can't find the right words to describe it. Calling Mars Needs Moms a bad movie is like calling the sky blue. Everyone already knows it, so why do I need to say it? God. Alright, let's just wrap it up. From its inception, it seems like Mars Needs Moms was a project that was always destined to fail. It was using an animation style that was reaching less and less people at the theater, it failed to score its target demographic, there were better family films playing at the same time, it cost way too much, and the story and characters weren't interesting enough to keep audiences hooked. All this culminated in a monumental bomb that took down Image Movers Digital and killed several other films before they were able to get off the ground. So that's the story of 2011's Mars Needs Moms. Disney's failed next big thing. But what are your thoughts on the movie? Have you seen it? What did you think about the animation? I'd love to know down in the comments. This has been Tom from Isenhart Productions, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week. And here's a clue for next week's video. Are you a male protagonist in a disaster movie? Congratulations, you're now divorced.